From KPFK in Los Angeles, California, Valley Free Radio in Florence, Massachusetts, WNUC in Detroit, and BikeTalk.org worldwide, this is Bike Talk.
Bike Talk?
Welcome to Bike Talk. I'm Taylor Nichols.
And I'm Nick Richard.
You know, once again, we've gotten some really thoughtful emails. And as we always say, we're really impressed by the quality, the care that they take when they write us. So if you do have some feedback for us, you send us an email, or even better, leave us a comment on, Spotify or Apple Music. But this email right off the bat is from Sean Cirillo, and he asks a very good question. So let's read it, Nick?
Okay, you want to start?
Hi, I'm an avid listener to the show, and I really appreciate the way you highlight cycling issues.
I've been trying to advocate for better bicycle infrastructure here on Long Island, but I feel like I've exhausted most of my options at this point. In Nassau County, there's virtually no political interest or will to make progress. The Department of Public Works is still stuck in a 1950s mindset. The county's master plan hasn't been updated since 2010, and a cycling plan has been, quote, proposed since 1998 without ever moving forward. We have a population of 1.4 million, are on the doorstep of New York City. It's almost completely flat, and average trip distance is very short. It's the type of place that's primed for a cycling network.
And over the past 20 plus years, multiple great proposals have been made and even been brought to early planning stages, only to fizzle out and die. Grants have been awarded and the money just sits on the shelf.
I've spoken at both town and county meetings. I've made formal requests for traffic studies. I've had sit-down meetings with elected officials, and I've spent hours talking to my county planner on the phone. That must be fun. I've also reached out to multiple different advocacy groups, but the ones I've found are either defunct or focusing on more macro objectives like policy change at the state level and not individual projects.
I'd love to hear more discussion about how advocates in places like mine can overcome entrenched inaction and push leaders to take cycling seriously. Is there any chance of success when there is nobody who is willing to listen in positions of power? Thanks, Sean Cirillo, Oceanside, New York. Sean, we feel your pain. Full stop.
Yeah, I actually reached out to someone from Transportation Alternatives in New York City. They're very strong advocacy organization for, for bikes, walking, and they should know what to do. But, every Bike Talk is about what to do.
Is about trying to get people in places of power to listen. In fact, later on in this show, I have an interview with a bike hater, and you have an interview, Nick, with the author of A Love Letter to Suburbia, and she actually has some good answers there. So that's a great place to start, is a book like that. But I think, Sean, we're pushing the rock up the hill, and we just keep pushing. And little by little, we've talked about this before, about taking the red pill, right, Nick, in the Matrix. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden you start to see the world differently, about how much space we waste on free parking for cars, how much we give over our streets to cars so our children can't roam anymore. I feel Sean's pain.
Yeah. Well, Diane, the author of A Love Letter to Suburbia, she connects every bad thing to car dependency. Literally every bad thing, like health and community and relationships and everything.
And I think she's right. I think you and I both listened to the book just over this weekend, and I really enjoyed it. And I was so sorry I missed the interview that you got with her, but that's coming up later in the show.
Can we talk about your bike lane hater?
Fountain Avenue, which is an artery east-west in my neighborhood in West Hollywood, California. It is a very dangerous stretch of road, and Blake Ackerman, a 27-year-old lawyer, was killed there. We've mentioned it on the show many times, just a couple of weeks ago. And Fountain has been, for about 15 years, have safe infrastructure plans to change the street to make it safer for pedestrians, for people who ride a bike, for people who walk their dog or jog or whatever. And now it is coming to a final vote at City Hall. So the West Hollywood Department of Transportation has been doing all kinds of outreach. Basically, it's a 4-lane road. It's not 4 lanes all the time. It's 4 lanes and then it's 3 lanes because of on-street parking. And turn it into a dedicated bike lane with 1 lane of traffic in each direction. And they've had really more meetings than they did when they put in the 405, which is a big highway here in LA. Kevin Burton, who's on our staff here at Bike Talk, has been to every meeting and is a real champion of the plan. But I went to a meeting just this last week, and I spoke with Kyle Brazil, who spoke very strongly against the bike lanes. And after the meeting, I had a chance to talk to him. And Nick, I studied journalism at UCLA. And at first, when I first started talking with Kyle, I thought, well, I'll be a journalist and just let him talk. But shortly after he started talking, I realized I couldn't just let him talk because he was saying so many falsehoods that I had to speak up and give the other point of view. So Kyle was real gracious to speak to me and to be on Bike Talk, making his point of view.
All right, let's hear gracious Kyle.
So we've been talking on the show for years about Fountain Avenue and many streets like Fountain Avenue all across the world. And on Bike Talk, you normally hear, my voice or Nick's voice talking about how great bike lanes are and all these kinds of things. But there is another side of this argument, and I'm here with Kyle Brazil, who was at a meeting with me just now about Fountain Avenue, and he has a different opinion. He's not anti-bike. He just has a different opinion about how these things should happen. So, Kyle, thanks for coming into the Lion's Den, maybe even, and talking on Bike Talk. Tell me about the meeting tonight, what your feelings are about a project like Fountain, and why you are so impassioned to show up at so many meetings in a row.
Tonight's meeting was interesting. It had a slightly more narrow purview since this is more about public facilities and specific elements of the change. But what got me interested was I live at the corner of Kings and Fountain, so right in the middle of the corridor that will be impacted by the changes here. What concerns me is that we know the harms or the challenges that this imposes. It reduces public parking along the strip, and the expectation is it creates congestion, right? If you look at the Federal Highway Administration's guidance, they recommend road diets for roads that carry up to 20 to maybe 25,000 average daily traffic. This fountain carries 35,000. So by the FHA's own standards, this would not be an ideal candidate for a road diet. So I think the expectation is this will create congestion and diversion. What's not certain are the safety implications. I know bike lanes are generally viewed with a positive connotation. They're viewed as enhancing safety. But I think tonight, one of the best speakers, Michael, brought up some of the safety issues that are created by this project. I think if you look at historical examples within the city of LA along Venice Boulevard, after the implementation of a bike lane and road diet, they saw traffic speed increased by 1 mile per hour, collisions increased from 28 to 30, and bicycle traffic actually went down. So I think a lot of these preconceived notions about what a bike lane will mean for the community are great in theory, but you have to consider the fact that roads aren't created equally, and where bike lanes might flourish might not look like Fountain. And so I have concerns that a bike lane won't inherently increase safety. There are alternatives like addressing some of the most dangerous intersections along Fountain that would yield better results. And there are actually new safety issues created by this proposal. One, for example, that was brought up tonight. If you think about Fountain being a 2-lane road, on trash pickup days, there's going to be a garbage truck driving along Fountain. The odd of that creating people driving into oncoming traffic to get around vehicles holding up traffic on a 2-lane road, I think is higher. So I think, again, I don't know that we're guaranteed safety improvement, and I think there are real safety risks created by this. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag on where we land with safety.
Right. Data does show that when a bike lane is put in, it does make the road safer on most roads.
On average, yeah.
And trash can be solved by either having the trash picked up on other streets or whatever. I'm going to go back to the speeding because one thing great about a single lane in each direction is the prudent driver sets the speed, meaning if the guy in front of you is going the speed limit, 25, 30 miles an hour, you can't pass him, so you have to drive that speed. So I don't see how the connection between Venice Boulevard and Santa Monica is apples to apples. In that case, it's not.
Well, this would be my other challenge to that, is if you look at the traffic collision data, there were 14 fatalities that I can see dating back to 2013 available through the transportation.
God, that's 12 years, 14 fatalities in 12 years?
Yeah.
That's a street that doesn't work for anybody.
And again, at least what's identified in the transportation injury mapping system. And so what you can see is 80% of fatal collisions occurred between the hours of 9:30 p.m. and 4:30 a.m.
Okay, I don't know about that stat, but I'll take your word for it now.
Yeah, so during the day, absolutely, having two lanes is going to limit traffic speed. During the day, I wouldn't disagree that speed will be limited by traffic.
By the prudent driver.
That doesn't mean that there won't be fatalities because, again, when most fatalities are actually occurring is outside peak congestion times. And so, I'm someone who speeds. I'll admit, I'm not proud of it.
No, you shouldn't be, I don't think. We know that speed kills. A car going 40 miles an hour, this may not be a stat that you know, kills a pedestrian or cyclist 80% of the time. A car going 20 miles an hour kills that pedestrian or cyclist 5% of the time. So speeding is a real issue.
That's fine. I admitted, not proud of it, but I'm an impatient person, and we live in a real world where people will speed. What I'm saying is
But hold on, let me address that, because speeding, you're right. If the road allows you to speed, you will speed. But if the road doesn't allow you to speed, then you can't speed.
And what I'm telling you is when 80% of fatal collisions occur between 9:30 p.m. and 4:30 a.m., there's no barrier to speeding from a bike lane. I can speed.
True. But if the bikes are in a bike lane and not in the travel lane of cars, then you won't kill them.
And yet at every single intersection, you are still putting cars and bikes in the same roadway. What I worry more about is I'm not a very observant person. If you take bikers and further remove them from the road, I am less likely to know that person is coming up on my right side. So I actually fear that this increases the risk that I'm going to make a right turn and accidentally hit a biker and not know it. And maybe I would have avoided that collision had there not been bike lanes, because I would have seen the biker directly in the path of travel.
That's a crazy argument to me. You're saying that a bike lane with a bike in the bike lane, you wouldn't see the bike in the bike lane. You would turn right through across that biker's path and kill that biker because you're on your phone? What?
No, I'm driving, and my focus is on the traffic lane, so I'm not paying attention to a bike lane that is now further removed from where I'm driving.
Right.
What I'm saying is it disconnects the driver's focus from the biker's location.
Interesting, okay.
That's why there are two authors that I've cited online in online discussions with folks. But there is a term, I think it's called vehicular cycling.
Sure, that means riding your bike like you might drive your car in the traffic lane, pulling into the left turn lane to make a left turn, whatever.
Right, basically treating yourself as though you're a car, so vehicular traffic has to move around you. I don't know the safety stats. I want to do more research into that. But I would say it follows a similar principle of the more evident you make yourself to drivers, the less likely you are to be mistakenly.
That's a great point.
So, again, newer to research on this, have started over the last few weeks since this.
Well, that's one of the great things about this kind of public outreach. I mean, you've been to how many meetings about Fountain Avenue?
3 meetings. This is my 3rd.
So that's a lot of public outreach. That's really wonderful. And you're starting to learn a little bit more about how all these traffic situations work together. And you're right. When a bike has to bike in the street, it is better to be seen as traffic. But that's only for bikers like me or possibly you that are confident, good, strong bike riders. But if we want to get more people out of cars and onto other options, whether it be walking, mass transit, or bike, we have to make a safe place for them to ride their bike to the mass transit station, to the grocery store, or something like that. And that is a separated, protected bike lane. Granted, it's scary if someone like you is driving along and not paying attention when they make a right turn. Just like you do on a normal street, if there's a sidewalk, a child's leaving the sidewalk, you say you might hit that child because they're on the sidewalk crossing that intersection?
Well, I'm not going to say that I don't pay attention when I'm making a turn.
That's what we're talking about, though, right? If there's a bike in the bike lane and you're making a turn, you would pay attention. Just like if there were a child on the sidewalk, you would see the bike in the bike lane.
But this still puts the location of bikers further out of view of the driver, and particularly, from what I've read, particularly for drivers of larger vehicles like trucks that might have more blind spots, this makes it even more dangerous that truck might not even be able to see a biker coming further from behind that's going to create a collision.
So what do we do? Do we not do any kind of infrastructure changes that allow people to protect our environment, to not get in a car to drive? Your grocery store is a mile away. I haven't driven to the grocery store in years, and I live a mile from Trader Joe's, and you say you go once a month to the grocery store.
Once every other week.
Yeah, but just meaning, do we never do anything
No.
because of people like you on the road?
Okay, I think that's the biggest misconception and one of the kind of false choices we're presented here with. I think people that oppose this proposal do not oppose changing the status quo. I think we all agree the status quo
Doesn't work.
Right. I would agree. Fountain is not a safe road. I live at the corner. If I were to take my dog for a walk, I'm not going to walk down Fountain. I'm going to walk down to Santa Monica.
Yeah, Fountain's a terrible street to walk on, to walk your dog, to jog, to
Absolutely.
bike on, to do anything but speed on.
So what I think is we have to have a public discussion around public resource allocation.
Which we are.
I would say that this is more of the city decided what they want to do, and now they're just putting it in front of people.
We've been working on this for 14 years. You're new to this argument, but it is something that we've been talking about for a long time.
As it relates to Fountain, yes. I have not heard of a plan before a few months ago. Before the election was the first time I'd heard about the plans for the Fountain Streetscape project. And that's when Councilmember Erickson reached out to tell me before the election that this would be years away and that this was a non-issue.
Right.
Since I've seen the acceleration of the timeline, it sounds like, which was partially created by potential funding
grant funding,
opportunities,
right.
that has accelerated my nervousness, right?
So that doesn't mean that Erickson lied to you necessarily.
I think he misled people probably, but what concerns me is the sudden speed with which we are trying to ram this through without giving the public real opportunities to provide feedback. Like what I'd say is the Streetscape project, as it's been presented to West Hollywood committees and as it will be presented to the city council, have undergone no revisions as a result of open public commentary. This meeting, for example, the staff report to the city council on September 15th won't even be included in that staff report because they don't have time. They needed to send the report before they'll be able to summarize these points. So what I'm saying is it seems like we're rushing and we haven't really given time for the public to consider this and provide alternatives. Like tonight, again.
Why do you think the public knows more about traffic configuration than experts do?
I guess I would... I don't know that I would call Chris Corral an expert in this.
Well, I don't know who Chris is, so let's not... Okay.
He's only been involved in the project 5 months.
Yeah, but I'm guessing Chris works with traffic experts.
My concern is from the very start, like I spoke with Councilmember Meister as well, the original intention here was to have a policy that looked at a comprehensive safety solution, right? Explore all options on the table to understand how can we improve safety along the Fountain Corridor and throughout West Hollywood. This turned into a bike lane project with little interest in public input that doesn't have to do with the bike lane. It's apparent in the survey they sent around, which offered 3 options. Do nothing or 2 options with the bike lane. Where were the options gauging public interest in evaluating intersection safety, to change lights, to change traffic lanes, to add protected left turns, things like that?
Right. A lot of those are in this plan.
They're not.
They are. I mean, I've seen the plan, and there are box turns for bikes. There are bike boxes for bikes. And you're right. Intersections are very tough places for bikes and cars and people to all coexist. But people who study this know how to do it, and they're doing it in some of those intersections on the 2 main ones.
What would put my mind more at ease, and what I haven't seen from this project team or the city, is the specific studies, the specific experts, the outputs of those results.
Right.
What I hear is generic references to stats and studies. Right. Like
a lot of this is common knowledge for people who are in this world, and you're new to this world.
Every street is created differently.
Sure.
And so to pretend that something that worked on a street miles away in a different state, in a different city.
But, every heart is different. You're right. And so a stent might not be right for every heart, but we know that a stent works if you have that issue.
I think what they need to do is start with frameworks. Right, absolutely. There are frameworks for evaluating public safety and transit options, and then that framework needs to be applied to the specific circumstances in which you're looking at it. What I haven't seen is any evidence that has been done that specifically considers Fountain. And when I attend these meetings...
again, we've been working on it for 14 years.
But then when I attend these meetings, what I hear, for example, someone today that spoke mentioned that before public engagement and public comments, there hadn't been any effort by the project team to reach out to Athens Services about trash removal, to the fire department about emergency service response, to the police department about emergency service response. So I think this is a lesson in the project team facilitating this is learning how to do this as they go, and more iteration, more input only improves the end product. And what I'm thinking is there hasn't been enough input. What I've also heard at many of these meetings is there are a lot of common, non-divisive solutions that everybody thinks should be implemented as soon as possible, right? Like some of that work at intersections, no one's opposed to it. Why wouldn't we just do that now? I think what people are saying is before you go and completely restructure a 1.8 mile stretch of road that carries 35,000 cars a day, let's make sure we're doing this thoughtfully in a way that actually improves safety.
My argument would be Fountain Avenue is not about bike lanes at all. Bike lanes are a positive byproduct of making the streets safe. Let me say one more thing, that I was on the task force in 2011, and we came up with a completely different street environment, and we did reach out to the fire department, and we did reach out to trash services, and we had 4-lane to 3-lane road diet with a center left turn lane. And so the project people that are running it now have made changes over the years. I think that that's an important thing for you to hear, that it is not, this is what we think is the best thing and this is what we're going to go with. They've been studying it and working on it for a long time.
I think as people involved in the project have changed, you'll naturally get some of those. What I'm curious to is, why was the public never asked, at least recently, as it comes to this streetscape project, like when mailers were sent around surveying respondents, why was there no option of saying, should we widen sidewalks and have a dedicated 3-lane road, 1 lane in each direction with a dedicated turn lane going down the whole corridor? That seems like something that should be put to the public, especially if you're trying to gauge interest. Right. What makes the cynic in me stand out is like when you give people a survey that has 3 options, do nothing, and then 2 bike lane options, like it's hard for you to tell me that this hasn't all along been about putting bike lanes in. And the city has the city is pushing the same thing. The state is pushing the same thing. It's why CEQA exemptions have been created for bike lane projects. They don't care about the environmental impact. They're just pro-bike lane. This, to me, is just progressive.
You know, this goes back to that whole all-powerful bike lobby, which really doesn't exist. And it's not really about bike lanes. Bike lanes oftentimes is a losing issue for people.
I think this is performative, progressive politics at play that will make some people's lives harder. And then you have mixed guarantees on safety. There's no guarantee on safety, right? You can tell that with Venice Boulevard. Fatalities continued, collisions continued, speed stayed the same. So there's no guarantee on safety here. We know it will make some people's lives worse. Again, I think this is an example of progressive politics saying, hey, look, we're pro-bike lanes, that's pro-environment, let's do this, without a real thorough evaluation of, is this actually going to make life safer along Fountain?
That's so interesting. I think that's a messaging problem that the city of West Hollywood is dealing with. And again, I've been involved with this for 15 years. From my standpoint, it is really not about that at all. It's about trying to make a major artery east-west through the city of West Hollywood a safe, comfortable, pleasant place to live, to work, to walk, to bike, to walk your dog, to jog, to get to the grocery store. And bike lanes are a positive byproduct of making this 70-foot wide street safe.
You've heard people at some of these meetings ask questions about alternative safety options, right? Like speed bumps, like speed cushions, which create space for emergency vehicle tires so that you don't slow down emergency response times. And the response by the project lead has been, at least, we haven't evaluated that. We don't have time to do that before we go to the city council. We can look at that in the future, but to date we haven't. If this had really been a comprehensive evaluation of what can we as a city do to best improve safety for all travelers down Fountain, you would have had better answers as to why bike lane was the right answer.
Right. I think that's information that's out there that, maybe after our conversation you'll look at some of the books that we've been talking about, or maybe you'll listen to Bike Talk and hear experts talk about these issues. Speed bumps don't really do it. People end up speeding from one speed bump to the next, and that doesn't really make the streets safe, especially on an artery like Fountain where cars are going 40 miles an hour.
What I'll tell you, as someone who has admitted I speed down most roads. If it's an open roadway, I'll speed. When I go to UCI to see friends there, they have speed bumps all around campus. That slows me down. When I drive through the flats in Beverly Hills because I don't want to deal with traffic on Santa Monica Boulevard coming back from Century City, you can't speed through the flats because the intersections have hills that slow you down. Right. I think structural elements
That's exactly what we're talking about, structural elements, right.
Yet bike lanes leave 2 open lanes.
Why are you so obsessed with bike lanes? What is it? I mean,
because this is I'm sorry. No. You're trying to pitch this as though it's not a bike lane project. It is specifically a bike lane project because there were no alternatives ever offered that didn't have a bike lane. this is purely about bike lanes.
Again, I've been involved with this for 15 years. It is not. It is about making the streets safe, and bike lanes are part of that. We know, hold on, we know that when you put a bike lane on a street, you make the street safer for everybody.
True. That's, again, not true. You're ignoring a very real example.
I'm ignoring maybe one example, which I don't even know about.
Have you dug into the examples that you are referring to?
Absolutely. I've read and interviewed many people and been on many streets. It is a given. The data proves that when you put a bike lane in, you make the street safer for everybody.
What I'm telling you is I work in data analytics, and you can look at averages all day, and averages do not give you the answer. What you have to look at is the distribution of outcomes and understand which cases actually apply. So, for example, right, you could look at 100 roads and 100 road diets and bike lane implementations and say, on average, this was the net outcome.
Right.
And that might be positive. I think that is. That's why so many studies make reference to bike lanes being a positive influence for safety. Right. What I would say is, number one, you need to filter that data set to roadways with similar features as Fountain Avenue. For example, a long stretch of roadway that doesn't have frequent intersections, I think a bike lane is going to be much more effective there because you don't have as much frequent interaction between cars and bikes. A roadway like Fountain, which is constant intersections, driveways, and garages, you're inherently putting cars and bikes at odds.
Well, just like you're putting cars and cars at odds, right?
Sure.
Meaning that the car pulls out of its driveway into a 40-mile-an-hour moving car as opposed to an 8-mile-an-hour moving bicycle.
I think what we're all saying is speed is probably one of the biggest factors here, right?
And you're the one that speeds.
I do speed, yeah. I'm not. Again,
Why?
I'm not proud
Why?
of it.
Why do you speed?
I'm impatient.
But there's other things to do. I mean, listen, you've been really great to talk to me, but I'm really curious why you're so proud of the fact that you speed.
I told you I'm not proud about it. I'm acknowledging a character flaw. I'm impatient and I speed. That is what it is. I try.
Okay.
I do my best to control my speed, but I think, again, this will probably make it worse. Road rage, like if you get irritated driving along a roadway, for me, at least personally, I am more likely to speed and drive aggressively because I'm growing more.
Unless the road doesn't allow you to, whether it be speed bumps or a narrow lane.
And the difference between a narrow lane and a speed bump is narrow lanes work when there are periods of congestion. Again, what I'm saying is 80% of fatalities occur between 9:30 p.m. and 4:30 a.m. And so there is no congestion at those hours to slow someone down. What works 24/7? Speed bumps, speed cushions. Those are there 24/7. They're constant barriers to speeding, whereas congestion imposed by fewer lanes is subject to actual traffic.
It's not really congestion. It's just, it's usually what it is. It's a smoother flow of traffic going at a slower speed because the prudent driver sets the speed, not the imprudent driver like they do now on Fountain Avenue.
But what I can tell you is even today with 4 lanes on parts of Fountain Avenue, it's already moving at a stop-and-go pace. So it's reducing lanes is not going to be a constant, clean motion, especially with this proposal's lack of a dedicated turn lane, right? Like at any intersection where someone's holding up traffic to turn, you're going to have congestion. And traffic already, as structured along Fountain, traffic backs up all the way to Holloway along La Cienega for people trying to get onto Fountain. I think this project is just going to make it impossible to get through those intersections.
Interesting.
In that area.
Well, this is why we're having all these meetings. Kyle Brazil, you've been really great to talk to me. And I make the offer again. I will ride with you to work in a suit anytime you want in a bike lane. There's a bike lane along Santa Monica. What time do you have to be at work?
Usually between 8 and 9.
It's cool then. And you'd be surprised.
This week.
But the offer always stands. I will ride with you to work. I'll wear a suit also. And I'll get you there safely. And I'll open your eyes to a different way of interfacing with the city. West Hollywood's a very small city. I think you said you work in Century City. Yep. It's only a couple of miles away. And on an e-bike, you won't sweat at all if you have a safe place to ride.
Or I can just use vehicular cycling and take my space on the road.
I would argue for that. I often have to do that because we don't have the infrastructure that we need to allow more people to bike. Yeah. It's only confident, strong bikers that can bike on the road like that. Kyle, you've been really great to talk to me. Thanks, man.
Yeah, I appreciate the time.
Thanks for going into the enemy territory there, Tom.
Right.
We really tried to be polite to each other, and he was polite, and he made some good points. And I said to him, anytime you want, I will meet you in the morning and ride you 1.5 miles or 2 miles to your work. I'll even wear a suit. I actually have a suit, so I would wear it. Just to let him know that it's possible to ride your bike 1.5 miles in a city like Los Angeles.
I know you have a suit, Taylor. You're a professional person. But you got like a suit you can ride in?
Yeah. I actually went to a movie premiere on my bike in a suit one time.
There's a lot of pictures of people in suits riding bikes.
Sure. Yeah.
It's a good
But
look.
I think that my interview with Kyle really sets up your interview with Diane, because as you said earlier, Diane's book, A Love Letter to Suburbia, really does open our eyes to blaming so many things on car dominance.
Well, I'm going to play the second part of our interview, actually. I did the standard interview with Diane, and then when we were done recording, she said, do you have any questions or issues with the book? You know, she seemed to be probing in a way, and I said, well, you know, there was this part about 15-minute cities where I found like you don't have the party line that we have about 15-minute cities, that they're just good. And she seemed more interested in that part of the conversation. So this is Diane Alisa, author of A Love Letter to Suburbia. You're not exactly an urbanist, but you are an urbanist, and you're talking about suburbia as being kind of solution, but it's also the problem. And you have an interesting way of sort of being in the middle between the poles in our country, the polar opposites. Do you want to talk about how you manage that?
Well, I live in a very red area. Utah is extremely red, and then I had a very blue major, I would say. My acting major was very political. And so I was wrestling with a lot of ideas between those two ideologies, and I basically became very intimate with both of them. I knew what they wanted, I knew what they were triggered by, and I had to, when I was writing my book, I had to make sure that I was appealing to both of these groups. And urban design, I just don't even think is in the cultural consciousness yet, even with blue-leaning people. I know that they're way more okay with it, but I still don't think that we're like, oh, why aren't we thinking about urban design? Why aren't we making libraries super beautiful? Why aren't we like building a world? You know, why aren't we like in a video game, in a Minecraft game, and building a beautiful place? Like, we just are not thinking that way anymore. We're thinking, what's the next thing I can buy on Amazon? Right? And this is modern America, and modern America sucks. Like, I just get this feeling from both groups that I think that the red side is like fighting for America, but I do think deep down they're very disappointed in what America has become. And they haven't thought of urban design yet. It's just, I wanted people to start thinking about creating beautiful societies again and not consuming.
Well, we think about, I guess we're calling it Red America, as being anti-bike infrastructure. I know they're anti-15-minute cities, but
Yes.
in your book, you're not taking like a pro-15-minute city stance.
Mm-hmm.
You're sort of acknowledging their concerns.
Yeah, I completely understand their concerns. They have this idea of city life. They don't like the density. They don't like the word city. It triggers them. They equate any type of density as a form of communism and socialism. And we have a city that's being built right now called Utah City, where the prison was. And the red parts of Utah, I think many of them are just upset about it. They don't like the idea. And I'm actually a little bit upset about it too, because it's being built in a car-dependent system. And so all of that density is going to bring cars into the area, even though a lot of it is going to be in the city as well. And right now, because the car is equated to freedom, if you build anything that doesn't have a car, then they automatically believe that they will be stuck in that place, because right now that's true. If they don't have a car, they can't really go places, and it's very inconvenient and difficult for them. So they're very fearful of anything that doesn't have a car. So my goal was to show them that designing things not for the car but for them would give them like 10 times the amount of freedom. You know, if we had trains and trams and trails everywhere, then they would have actual freedom of movement, which they don't right now.
If you tell a red person, it's funny they're red now, but if you tell somebody who's red that they should bike to Costco, they're like, that's crazy because, but they're not wrong.
No, they're not wrong.
They probably get killed, or I don't know, probably, but
yeah,
no,
and that's their first assumption.
Because
that's their first assumption is that you're going to have to bike to Costco. And my book basically says, no, that's ridiculous. Why would you ever bike to Costco? You should be walking and biking and taking the tram to your libraries, to your bakeries, to your soap shops, to, things that are quaint and charming and giving you the amenities that you're hoping for, but not in a commercial box store.
So, and you talk about suburban capitalism in your book, and it's a lot about the box stores taking away business from local. You talk about free market solutions, right? Which would be like ordinary people could have a bike store or a bakery, and it wouldn't be siphoned off.
But by the box stores.
Yeah.
There's part of my message that I think is a bit triggering to the left. So my book, I'm just trying to, walk my way through both sides of these groups that I'm trying to unify in a way that they can actually start collaborating again. And so it's been really tricky to find that nuance. But capitalism is one of the things that I get pushback on the left for, understandably so, because I actually label it suburban capitalism. It's an economic system. Car dependence is an actual economic system that is using urban design to manipulate the free market toward elite groups of people. And that's often very startling for my right-leaning audience to hear, because they believe that they're living in a free market too. And when I tell them that they're not, and that the car is being used as a weapon to take away their businesses, to take away their livelihood, their housing affordability, it's a bit confusing at first. But once you see it, you can't unsee it. The car is being used to take away every useful, local, wonderful amenity that you have. And a regular bakery just can't compete next to Walmart. And so instead of the baker being the neighborhood watchdog, the guy who sets up bingo community events and who has fresh bread that has only 2 ingredients instead of 17 ingredients in a processed bread, then you lose out on it, right? You're like, well, the bread is $2 cheaper at Walmart, and I only have to go to Walmart. And so we're not actually living in a free market, because if we were, you'd be able to open up your bakery near your neighborhood and they could walk to you and get fresh bread. I think there's a part of us that doesn't really know what a free market looks like in America, because we haven't actually had it.
Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about corporate socialism. I mean, our socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor, right?
Right.
I don't hear the part that would have triggered somebody on the left, though.
I've had people who just don't like capitalism at all. They don't want on the left.
So free market solutions, like they don't want small businesses,
right?
They want government bread.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
So, but I don't think it's possible without a free market solution. I just think it will be really difficult, and that people will feel super powerless. You're basically saying, without a free market, that a very small group of elite people should determine the market. And if it doesn't benefit them, who's to say you can even convince these people to do that for you? And then, depending on who's in charge, what president is in charge, who are they going to hurt in the process? I give a metaphor in my book where you have a system of water. It's all being irrigated to like a very small group of people, and I want it to be irrigated to like all of the American populace. I want them to have economic and political power again, and to have really strong local walkable municipalities. Yeah.
Talking about right and left and what triggers people, I thought it was an unconventional thing of you to say that people who object to more than 4 kids are overreacting. Because I come from the point of view that that's a lot. That's a lot of kids. If everybody has 4 or 5 kids, there's going to be impacts, right?
I'm not advocating for large families in my book, but I am making the point that we have a stigma against large families because of our urban environments. So, for example, if I had more than 4 or 5 children, I think right now people would be like, why are you doing that? You're ruining the planet. You're not giving enough attention to these children. And my argument is, one, it's really never been about space in terms of if we're having enough children. I think it's always been about inefficient design. Because right now, for example, the red side of the aisle is like, please don't bring more people to me. They want it to just stay static as it is. And it's because anytime people come into the area, more car traffic comes, more asphalt comes, more chaos comes, more box stores come that they don't want to actually live by. And so that is paired with people at that point. It's paired with children themselves. Like, please don't have that many children. We can't handle you having children.
I thought they were all into, at least white people, producing babies.
Yeah. And well, I hope everyone has babies, but it is a cognitive distortion. They want families, but they can't see how. They basically want families for only themselves. They want the amenities for themselves. You know, they want to move to homesteads and find a couple of families and work off the land. They want families, but they don't want the density, which is really interesting. So basically what they're saying is we want big families, but we don't like suburbia, is how I've translated that for them, because they want to be near their families. That's why I call it family-centric zoning in my book, because when you say a city, they get triggered. And when you say, but what if you were living with your mother-in-law and your cousins and your children? What if your children lived with you and your grandchildren? And that really connects with them. They are like, oh, yeah, actually, maybe I don't want to live in a single family house. Maybe it would be nice if my children could come and their children could come and we could all be together. And maybe fresh bread is better than driving to Walmart. So, and then the last thing is that my infant section, basically I start with infancy because it is the crux of design, in my opinion. If you can't design urban environments that cater to infants, then you're not creating proper design. We have strange ideas about children, that a kid should just be a kid and they should have very little integration into society. They shouldn't have jobs. They shouldn't be able to like walk places because it's too dangerous. And we've just decided upon this thing instead of creating environments where they can actually grow up in a functional way. And that starts in infancy. We are simply not carrying our children enough. We are not giving them enough physical touch. We are not there for our babies enough. And it's because we have taken the individualism out of motherhood. We have basically said, you will live in suburbia and you will be behind a white picket fence and you will be a mom and that is it. And if you put your children in daycare, you are a bad person. And if you go work, you are a bad person. So we have this culture around motherhood and childhood that it doesn't work. It creates a subculture of infant care that is extremely detrimental to both mother and baby. Having 4 or 5 children with the argument saying that, well, you shouldn't do that because you can't give them enough time and you don't have enough money and it's irresponsible. Actually, children need the absolute most time the first year/3 years. And then after that, they should be able to roam around their communities in a safe way. Like they should be able to explore. Right now, paradoxically, women and children and just families in general are spending too much time together and too little time together. So they're not being with their infants during the right time, and then they're spending too much time with their children, kind of helicoptering what they're doing, where they're going, regulating soccer practice and driving them to school. And so...
Do I remember a phrase from your book where you said that everybody's raising their kids like they're going to be in the top 1% of athletes or,
yes.
or professions?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. And this is what suburban culture does, is that your kid doesn't have any organic experiences in the neighborhood. They can't even pick up eggs for dinner. They don't know hardly anybody. And so they're like, well, okay, then we're going to put you in soccer. And for what purpose? I feel like kids are spending like hundreds of thousands of hours in these professional sporting attitudes, and then once they get to high school or they graduate, they're like, what am I supposed to do with my life? I have no skills except for how to kick a ball. The transition into adulthood is extremely painful. In my book, there's a quote, I believe, from Jane M. Twenge about the generations, that it's okay that adulthood is progressively getting later. And I completely disagree with him. I really don't think it's okay. I think that technology is not an excuse to delay our children and make adulthood really difficult for them. And right now, the 20 to 30s is that time period where they should be being adults, but they're now reliving their adolescence and discovering the world during their 20s and 30s. And that's a way less safe place to learn how to be an adult. You know, there's access to drugs and media consumption and like existing poverty and having babies out of wedlock or just unplanned childlessness. There's so much that is on the shoulders of an adult that they should be able to handle, and they just can't, because they kind of have the emotional maturities of like 10-year-olds and 13-year-olds. You know, they just haven't been able to slowly grow up in America at all. It's
screens.
Yeah. The screen issue is that parents themselves are not capable of handling the addiction. And so their children also suffer the consequences of that.
But cities are not always the answer either in your book, right? Like you mentioned how cities can be too dense.
I do think that's true. I think that we should be very conservative on how dense we make a place. I really don't like skyscrapers because the infrastructure for a skyscraper is difficult to upkeep. And it causes, like, the weather is actually different. You know, I talk about how places that have too high of buildings get super windy. And it is literally difficult to walk.
Canyon effect?
Yes, the canyon effect, where it's difficult to walk. In New York, their sewage systems they're starting to be unable to handle the amount of weight on them from these tall buildings. So I am very much in a moderate conservative view of how big a city should be. Well, I just think we should have tons of them, like lots of villages that are all interconnected, but not like huge mega cities everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Should there be buildings?
Yeah, I think so. I basically say that they should be about 5 or 6 stories tall, and that's about it on height. And I do that too because I'm talking to my conservative audience, and they just hate the idea of density. So I'm like leading them along, and I'm saying, okay, you know, density is good if there's lots of family, and I'm also not trying to make you live in a city because they just hate that idea.
Wow, it's amazing that they really hate cities.
They really do. Yeah.
It's just.
Yeah.
It's good to know about that. I think a lot of people are really in the dark about the attitudes going on. I mean, I think people on the left were caught by surprise.
Yeah.
You know, then they still don't really get it. Like they're like these people are just racist losers who took over the country, and they're upset because we're not in the 50s.
Yes, that's exactly it. Yep.
And it's a little simplistic.
It is, because I feel like even some of the conservative side is kind of coming out of it in a way. I've seen some people talking about how the 50s wasn't necessarily ideal, and I'm really happy about that because it means that they're ready to hear a new message about families. But they are right in a way. You know, I think we have this traditional family unit that's really religious and is connected to the suburbs, is how they talk about it, I guess. And so I had to be extremely gentle on that too. I had to basically say, I know you love families. This isn't working. And it's not traditional the way you're saying it's traditional. and we can have something a lot better for your families. I think they're worried about their children. I think everybody's worried about their children. Something that I'm upset about is the idea that like the left doesn't care about families. It's not true. They have children just as much. And so I hope that the message resonates for everybody, that your families can be better off in different urban layouts.
So a love letter to suburbia is really like, could be thought of as a letter, and you're in a relationship where it's really not working, but here's how you can fix it, and you know it can be beautiful.
Yeah, basically. Do you want to talk about the racism real quick?
Yeah, let's talk about the racism.
I released a reel about dancing, and it was my most viral reel, that the suburbs steal a culture of dancing, and it's why we don't have a big dancing culture anymore, because of the driving and the separation of community and the degradation over time.
They steal the culture of dancing, you said?
Yeah, because you don't have organic communities anymore, and so it starts to lean really regulated, right? Now you have to pay for dance lessons instead of go to the dance hall. And it's just a facet of culture that I think people are super sad about. And it's one of the reasons.
They used to have dance halls. They used to have more places where people, I guess now we have
people
clubs.
Could dance. Yeah, you have to pay to get into a club, and there's a lot of alcohol. It's just not quite as family friendly, where teens and tweens can go and young adults can go and dance and enjoy themselves. Because there's no walking anymore. There's no meeting people serendipitously anymore. But I had a lot of people on that reel talk about racism, and I've had just people talk to me in general where they want me to talk about race. And we have two things going on, I think, where the left is really upset at the right for accepting a system that was built on racism. And then you have the right who feels very distant from the racism and does not consider themselves racist, but are still clinging to this suburban system, and they feel extremely defensive about racism. They don't want to be called racist. They don't consider themselves racist. We can talk about actual racists, but I'm just saying in general, I had to talk about race very delicately in my book, and I don't bring it up very much because they feel harassed, is how I'll say it. But I believe that America right now, in many ways, wants to move past the racism conversation and actually provide solutions for it. And in my book, I generate the idea of villages, that you do not have to be completely intimate with your neighbor. You don't have to be the same color. You don't have to agree religiously. You don't have to have the same culture, even in a way, right? We want a general American culture, but you're not necessarily going to be best friends with your next door neighbor. That villages provide that safety net where you have propinquity, proximity. You are meeting people organically, but you don't have to be completely intimate and agree with every type of political ideology that your neighbors do. And that gives the freedom for people to be in more diverse scenarios and still be able to function, because it's not the religion that is keeping you together. It's not the race that's keeping you together. It's the place itself. You all value this beautiful place that you're living in. And lastly, I'll just say, my book is about urbanism, and I can't fight every political battle. And so I'm going to, kind of stay in my lane in that way. But I do hope that as a culture, urban landscapes will help shift us to be less angry at each other. I just don't think the left understands how defensive the right feels right now about race. Like, they also want to solve the problem. They just have zero idea how to, and they feel blamed, unfortunately. So,
well, best of luck to you and
yes.
to us.
Yeah.
And thanks especially for the audiobook version, because now I can read it while driving.
You
or
can read
biking.
it while driving and be upset while you're reading it.
Because I'm driving.
Yeah, no. Because now it's been made clear how terrible of a situation you've been placed in.
Yeah.
So, good.
Thanks, Diane.
Yep, thank you.
All right, so that was Diane Alisa, and we will have more from her.
You know, that makes me think. I ended the conversation with Kyle, the bike lane hater, by sort of saying to him, you know, there's so much good information out there about urban planning and these kinds of issues. Do yourself a favor and pick up one of these books. And he asked me as we were parting, what is the one book I would recommend? And I'm curious, what's the one book that you would say that you would recommend to someone who is maybe anti-bike lanes, who wants to open their eyes to this world?
That's a good question. Maybe start with a love letter to Suburbia, because if you're coming
I thought so too, yeah. You know, so many of the books we have talked with the authors on our show, whether it be Paved Paradise or so many other authors we've had on. I did think of The Walkable City Rules by Jeff Speck, which is the second book in his canon of books on walkable cities, because even though that's not directly about bicycles, it is about urbanism.
Okay, yeah. Well, but basically it's urbanism. And so, Google urbanism.
And, maybe that's a good note for Sean, the guy who wrote our listener email at the top of the show, is turn some of those books on to those people on his council. Speak about what other people are saying in other cities about urbanism, and maybe in his neighborhood, they will read those books and their eyes will be opened also.
Although now that I think about it, Diane Alisa said she's not really an urbanist.
Really? Well, she blames a lot of stuff on cars, and so that's the urbanism line, I think.
Thanks for another superb show.
Yeah, we want to thank Sean Cirillo. We also want to thank Kyle Brazil for coming on the show, and Diane Alisa for writing her book and coming on the show. We also want to thank our regulars, Julie Richard, Kevin Burton, Amy Ziering, Lindsay Sturman, Stacy Randecker, Josh Hagland, and Charlie Lighthizer.
All right, and I would ask you for a quote, but...
We're totally out of time.
Well, I wanted to tell you a dream I had.
Oh, okay.
I dreamed your bike got stolen.
Oh, no, that's bad news.
Yeah,
Don't
what do you
tell
think it
me
means?
that. It means I'm going to lock up my bike, that's for sure. Ride safe.
Bike Talk is a project of CRSP and the Los Angeles Eco-Village Institute. And that was Bike Talk. If you have a story, a tip, or a topic, head over to biketalk.org and send us a message. Talk again next week.
Get that car out of my way. I wanna ride my bike today. Keep it fit, get me there. I won't go stinking up the alley behind the daily grind. Let your mind unwind. Give us life, pretend to life. Better get yourself a bike.